As your Democratic candidate for president, these are some of the issues that I see that need to be addressed from my seat here in Ohio as a descendant of the founding family of the Democratic Party, the Donaldsons, with President Andrew Jackson. Number one, I believe that we're running a false economy that cannot be accounted for correctly. And a lot of the numbers that we get from Rupert Murdoch and Ted Turner Media and the rest are projections, because they don't really know the real numbers because of rolling credit and such. We must convert our economy to electronic funds transfers. I know they want to call them bitcoins and all this kind of fluff to make people feel secure that they're actually getting something physical in exchange for their barter, work, or whatever. But the bottom line is, we don't need something physical. We just need the ability to transfer the credit. Now you'll notice a lot of places, and I'm going to use a place I worked, Flying J Pilot truck stops, owned by Cleveland Browns owner Mark Hazelwood, paid us with Com Data cards. And what that means is that in his bank accounts, he can transfer his payroll to the person without ever having to give them anything or mail them anything except for the initial card. Once you get that card, instead of pulling money out, the government needs to put regulations in place to where you can only swipe your card or give routing numbers and bank account numbers to transfer the funds and do away entirely with currency. That's going to alleviate a lot of your non-taxed workers. It's going to alleviate a lot of your drug dealers who are laundering money through businesses that don't have the income to support their expenses. We can shrink our IRS, which is bloated because of these type of issues, and start to work on getting people on board to a new type of economy that can be better controlled for things like the infrastructure plan NAFTA had for Mexico. Because what we can do is regulate all of the incentives or interest rates like they do today to get people more in tune to buying Mexican products and building their economy with our influence and the banking systems. Also, it can be something that's looked at throughout the world as a pioneer chapter into this United Nations democratic, civilized approach to new societies working together to help our fellow man, like Bill Clinton intended with the NAFTA plan, and not allowing for these people to be underpaid, misrepresented, and not marketed correctly. Therefore, building that economy, stabilizing it, and incentivizing people to stop crossing the borders in such numbers that it's crippling New Mexico, Texas, California, and Nevada, and several places along the borders. Even Florida has seen its share of the illegal aliens who come here, become desperate, and start to participate in some of these unaccounted for sort of sub category type economies like drugs, alcohol, prostitution, and gambling, which would almost be impossible not to do without having the paper trail of the EFT transfers, suspicious activity reports, and things such as that. I think it would build North America, Canada included, to be a more even and more sustainable world order on our side of the globe. And then others in Europe and so on can sort of see where, things like communism and fascism exist and how we can try to fix it by addressing it economically, be it through tariffs and taxes or such, because nothing would get Vladimir Putin's attention more than the automobile prices going through the roof and causing people not to be able to travel, causing people not to be able to purchase American products. And it would also let us see whether or not the Chinese are really serious about things like human rights and equality amongst peoples. On the third subject of my plan, I would like to address how we run our rehabilitation in the United States of America. And I'm not just talking about prisons, which have made great strides because of the focus on the classroom settings in prisons to allow people to further their education and become smarter and become more marketable when they come out to attain legal work that will sustain their lifestyle and give them the option to be happy and to be content and to be productive, and most of all, to be accepted by communities as people who have been reformed. A lot of times when they're getting out of these prisons, they're not getting a fair chance because they're starting over without families to support them. They're starting over with no money in their pocket, and they're being dropped off on the streets where they've made new connections with other criminals inside our prisons and take a step up in the gangster business and become someone who is not just not desired in our community, but someone who is very dangerous because they have no other options except for to try to make that illegal cash. Once we change to these credit transfers, we can monitor these type of payments and therefore address the situation as your rent and your cars and your lifestyle are not constituted by your W-2 forms according to our computer records. And we can ask why this deposit was made and that deposit was made. We're giving them tools in their toolbox to succeed because they're achieving education in things like computer programming or like marketing or like finance degrees, so that they have the tools to be able to go out there and say, look, I'm able to do this specific job and have been training for it for 2 to 5 years or whatever it is. It gives them a better chance when they hit the streets. Number two, I think that part of their regiment, while they're in corrections, needs to be education. And I think a great start for that would be to run print shops where they're around positive information, like the U.S. for Hope campaign would provide. It would provide things to communities like the addresses and phone numbers of places that are there to assist elderly, that are to assist people with transportation, food, shelter, health care, and mental health services, as well as addiction services. And I've got them attached in a game plan that I have asked for sports teams and fuel stations and Walmart and McDonald's to have ready on their counters. Instead of asking for donations for causes, you can say, we would like to collect donations for ALS or whatever your cause is. And here's a book for $5. And here's another book for $5. So you can buy one or two, and all we do is add it to your bill when you swipe your card, and it'll say $5. And at the end of the year, if you make enough donations, you can write them off. Moving forward, we have to address some of the things that have been going on in the past. And one of them is our focus on OPEC in the Middle East. We have issues that are greater than the issues in the Middle East right here in Latin America. And it's obvious with the 1,800 illegal immigrants coming into our country every day. So I think that we need to take our military and staff these welcome centers that I have discussed before, that can be put together with monies from oil companies here in the United States, as well as World Soccer, football, Major League Baseball, the NBA, NASCAR. We can go on and on with people who should have a financial responsibility, as well as the ability to market to the Spanish community and vice versa, and work together to better both of our communities, making them safer, having plans, being able to collect information to better understand what the dilemma is. Energy sales. We have to get away from oil. It's something that's been looming over us for a long time, not only as consumers, but as governments. And to me, the best thing to do is sit down with people in the energy business, people like British Petroleum, people like Marathon, Shell, Sunoco, and Exxon, and all the different energy companies, just like that we did with the cigarette and tobacco industry, and say we need to have alternatives so that we can wean people off of this product that is causing so many problems, not only in the environment, but it's causing wars. It's causing us to invade places the size of Kuwait, causing soldiers to die, causing governments to be oppressive, and causing our seas to be polluted by these oil tankers time and time again. And sometimes the fines aren't enough to bring back the ecological stability that was there before we lost control of our big boat of oil and destroyed it. We have to focus on the environment as we do this with these new energy cells, be it atomic, be it nuclear, be it solar, be it hydrogen. There are alternatives out there, and these oil companies are going to start getting in the way of legislation that is here, like Barack Obama had with the windmills, to try to move away from our dependence on crude. The oil companies come in with their big money and they pay lobbyists, and they pay people in the media to run articles to throw this negative connotation on things that make sense. Clean energy makes sense. If you don't believe me, look up Bill Gates and see what Bill Gates is saying about the environment and the impacts that we're looking at in a very short period of time. These things must be addressed. Taxes. There's nothing more important than our financial stability in this country. We went through it once with the Great Depression. We've seen how the bankers and the stock market manipulated us to a point to where people didn't trust the money in the banks anymore. And we've seen the fallout of that. And thank God, a fellow Democrat, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, came along with all these tragedies happening and restructured the way our banking was working, offering government programs like FDIC. Mr. Roosevelt took the Democratic high road and said the government needs to be here with safety nets, so that when the system becomes defunct, that the government can say, we have ways to fix this. And that's all part of the U.S. for Hope campaign, to provide that information, the numbers, to say, look, we know you're struggling out there, and here's people that can babysit for you, because we have urged tremendously for churches to get involved in communities, more than what they have been. We have urged tremendously to have paper trails on monies and electronic transfers, so that we can take a look at some of the non-taxed, I hate to say businesses, but non-taxed revenues out there, and make sure that they're getting places that they're supposed to be getting. And that too is in the Mothers of Mercy 3.2 Act. When we go through and we address these things, and we start to restructure into this credit economy, I think it's very important to be upfront and honest about it. If you take a look at it, the majority of Americans, on the median, working Americans, 40 cents on the dollar is getting away cheap as far as taxes go. So I'm going to break it down very simply. If it's up to me, we're going to run 40%. And what that is 30% of your money will be taxed on your payroll check or your payroll credit transfer. And then you will pay a flat 10% tax throughout the country. The 10% tax would be something that is used by the municipality where the business is located that the transaction took place. If there is locations out there that are not able to sustain, then they would apply for part of the 30% that the federal government will be taking from everyone. I do understand farming communities and such. They do have issues with retail establishments and sales taxes, but there are other ways to collect those taxes, be it through, watching the agricultural community and making sure that the 10% is covered in donations for schools, donations for roads. We may have a place that doesn't have many businesses, but the people there are very well off. And we can go through and specifically look at each situation. But 30% on the federal government would be 20% to the federal government and 10% to the state. And we would be doing away with the municipalities or city tax. That would be taken care of by the sales tax. And we could even take a look at sales taxes being distributed by the state. It going into a fund being distributed, however the math works out, so that it's even for all communities. With that said, citizenship. We need to become patriots again, not to be divided into donkeys and elephants. We need to be one unified America. And that's what my great-great-uncle wanted back when he and my Donaldson family tried to establish independence from the English. Because the English had been, I don't want to say taunting, but they were setting up parliamentary-style governments here. And they were wanting to continue with the landlord-serf policies and land ownership. And I think that when we did establish our independence, and there was mistakes made, it's non-debatable, but at least we got to the point where we were America. And I think that America changed and evolved through the past couple hundred years. And we can take a look at people who are representatives of that change, of the ability to adjust and to be inclusive and to educate. And people who have survived major losses in their life. And we can recognize it. And we can put them on those pedestals. Like you'll find me talking about My Lady of Liberty. Someone who puts a lump in my throat when I think about her battles in life and how she has been so eloquent and carried her family eloquently to the threshold of inner peace, education, and commemorating her community, bringing people together. And you can't find that very often. I've talked about it on a local level with two families, and I think that they have done tremendous jobs. And in my community, they're the Davidsons and the Sanders. And I'm not going to say that we agree all the time on everything, but I'm going to say if you can have two families like we had here in Waynesville, to be able to teach, to be able to reach across the party lines, to be able to generate people and ideals, and to motivate them to be better people, you should celebrate both of them. And you should teach future generations. These are the ways that work. They are the ways to be successful. And they are the reasons that our flag flies still to this day, because they are ever changing. They evolve with the problem and always find themselves at the best possible solution. No matter how dire the situation, they make the best of it. And I would like to finish up by pointing out the pride that I have in my family, the Donaldsons and the Jacksons and the Browns and the Suttons, and there's many, many different variables. And I've spent a lot of time talking about politics. And when I do, I have to go through my grandpa, James Donaldson, and his Donaldson family for all that they have done in the United States of America. As you go back and you read the family history, I can't help but share a story. My mother wasn't one to brag. She really wasn't. And my grandmother wasn't either. But they had this sly way about them of getting their point across. And one day, my uncle in Kentucky, who did family tree genealogy a lot, asked his brother about doing some extra family genealogy. And his brother said, I wouldn't worry about it. And so what it was is he didn't like some of the answers that he heard, and he never did test the theory of whether they were true or not. And my mother and my grandmother weren't very fond of discussing it. And so as time went on, my grandmother and I had a conversation, and she told me about Maddie and Mary Dayton, which was her mother, and how much those two women had impacted the lives of her and her only child, which was my mother, Mary Donaldson. And so it took a while for me to catch on to it, but sometimes the best thing to do is to keep your aces in their places. And I'd like to finish up this speech tonight by saying that the conservatives chose over a man in the interview below, and it's a long one, and he deserves it, because he's one of the greatest Americans to come along in our generation. They chose a reality TV star for his Nielsen ratings, his arrogance, his hairdo, and his association with banks. His name was Donald J. Trump, and he ran our country. But before we clear browser histories on Mr. Trump, let's take a look at what they chose. A man whose dad asked him to quit going to school by not giving him any money anymore. Why? He said he's a narcissist who has to learn a lesson. That's true stuff. Number 2, he married Marla Maples, and in their divorce, he tarnished her reputation. He really did. It was disgusting, and it was a vulgar display of misogynism. Then, he became famous for the Mirage Motel in Atlantic City, and his boxing king, Mike Tyson, and King Television, who helped to sustain Atlantic City through their boxing promotions and such. And once they left, there was financial ramifications that came down on the Mirage and the rest of Atlantic City, leaving Mr. Trump in quite a bit of debt. So just like in his divorce, when he couldn't present his tax papers, he had the same story when it came to his debt and his bankruptcies that were filed year after year for tax benefits. He moved on to attack John McCain of Arizona and belittle a soldier, a POW, who should have been their choice for the conservative ticket. Have a good day. I hope that I've helped, and I hope that you can share this. All of my information is on YouTube at RodCast. And as you can see, my father just came in